So hello everyone. I'm happy to have this conversation today with Katie. I'm Gabriel Marcolongo, I'm CEO and founder of Incluyeme.com, and we start every training talking about why do we exist, and the main reason is that 3 out of 4 people with disabilities are unemployed in Latin America, and we're working together with companies and the community of people with disabilities to try to change this reality. Um, Our purpose is, again, to try to improve the lives of people with disabilities across Latin America and emerging markets. And the way we do that is to do upskilling and reskilling efforts with the community of people with disabilities, and also working with companies to enhance their inclusion initiatives across the region. Um, we are happy to have the biggest database of people with disabilities looking for jobs in Latin America, and also we have the pleasure to work with more than 700 companies across the region, and so we can do the matchmaking across both communities and trying to actually make lives better for both. Those are some of the countries who had experience working, and I had the honor of today having Katie as the speaker for us, and it's a pleasure to have you here, Katie. And
Thank you.
many times we are mentioning the value of Value 500 and towards making CEOs, um, helping to drive the change across companies, and it's actually a pleasure to have you here. Um, Katie, thank you again for being here.
My
And
pleasure.
if you have to describe about what Value 500 is and what's the vision uh, behind Value 500. What can you tell us and what can you share with us?
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I want to start by saying buenas tardes. I'm sorry, I'm only speaking in English, but I wanted to start with buenas tardes and also say a big gracias to Gabriel and the team at Incluyeme for having me. So thank you. So in terms of your question, let me tell you a bit about the Valuable 500, and specifically, as you ask, around the vision regarding disability inclusion at a global level. So the Valuable 500 is the world's second largest global business partnership after UN Global Compact. And forgive me for sharing some big statistics, but to help set the scale, and I think importantly, the potential and the power of our collective, we work with 527 big global businesses. That spans across 64 countries in 41 sectors, and they comprise together 24 million employees. So that cohort, that community has the most unprecedented potential to drive systems change and to work towards ending disability exclusion. So we passionately believe that the power is in the many. And the way we work together with our companies, we talk about taking synchronized collective action. So really, it's about turbocharging collaboration, because we feel that if collectively we can harness the might of the 527 countries globally to address the same problems at the same time in the same way, that's when we collectively can drive system change. And we work exclusively with the private sector. And the genesis, the origin of the Valuable 500 was all about getting the CEO commitment to start putting disability inclusion on their board agendas, because we believe that business, big business, can, within a boardroom meeting, within one business cycle, deliver what it can take governments or other stakeholders perhaps decades or even longer to do. So we don't just talk about driving system change with CEOs because we want to be hierarchical and hang out with the top people. It's because we really believe that they are in the driving seat of change. So that, I suppose, just to summarize, is our vision. It's the power of the collective globally, with critically the support and the influence of those C-suite leaders to drive that change from the top down within their organizations.
That's incredible. And how many CEOs have made the commitment to include people with disabilities?
So for all our companies, the commitment has come for all of them from the CEOs. So it's 527 CEOs. And to give credit to the vision of our founder, Caroline Casey, she was steadfast and resolute in saying, I only want the commitment from the CEO. She didn't just want C-suite, not that C-suite don't have
Hmm.
influence, but she really wanted it from that number one person who was responsible and accountable for the culture and the business performance of their organization. So the commitment for our 527 companies comes exclusively from the CEOs.
CEOs.
Yeah.
How easy it was to have the CEOs being on board.
Yes. Yeah, because I think, at the end of the day, it's not that you don't have other people within the organization who are of huge influence. Perhaps later we can come on to talk about it. And I know you're passionate about this as well, Gabrielle, but we believe it's critical to have ERGs, your employee resource groups, to have that grassroots
Mhm.
activism within an organization pushing up. But I think without that buy-in at the very highest level from that CEO, then you're not going to get the funding, to put it bluntly.
Hmm.
You're not going to get the sign-off and the support to make things happen quickly. And we're all about driving change at pace.
Sure. And can you talk about the commitments that companies were driving in those areas?
Yes, of course. So I think I'm going to start at a broader level. So I think that the framework that we use comes at a global level. So you mentioned in your introduction, you were talking about the UN Sustainable Development Goals,
Hmm.
and you rightly mentioned goals one about ending poverty and also about quality education. But the two that form our framework within the UN Sustainable Development Goals are number eight, which is all about the right for employment and decent work and economic growth, and number two, which focuses, number 10, which focuses on reducing inequalities. So we start with that framework. It's critical to make sure we use this language that is used within the disabled community of making sure that no one is left behind. So it is a commitment from our companies to create equal employment opportunities and make sure that they are recruiting people of all abilities. But of course, it can't just stop there in terms of the commitment. It's not just about a tick box exercise and just showing data for data's sake. When you are bringing in a glorious gamut, a glorious range of people with all different abilities that can really drive growth for your business, you want to train them properly. You want to make sure that all your platforms are digitally accessible. You want to create the right environment for them to do their best work. So the commitments come through recruitment, but also making sure that there is correct training, the setting up of the employee resource groups, as I said, creating goals and governance. And I think critically, coming back to the point I was making about leadership, we need to make sure that people with disabilities are not just given a job, but they are given a career. So they have the same opportunities once they are in an organization as everyone else. And of course, that links back to making sure they have the right accommodations and the right adjustments. So we work again with our C-suite leaders to make sure that people have the opportunity themselves as a disabled person to get into those positions of leadership. So I think from our perspective, the commitment starts at the higher level of we want to bring people of all abilities into our organizations. But as I said, the conditions, the frameworks need to be there. So I think the shape comes from the UN SDGs. And forgive me, I hope I've
Hmm.
got this correct, but from my research, I know that within Latin America, all companies have signed up and ratified the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So I think that
Yeah.
governmental pressure and that ratification is really important. But then the onus, then the obligation really is on the corporates to make sure that big business live and breathe those global commitments and those global goals.
And there is a saying here in Latin America that companies are doing stuff and making progress despite of governments, not thanks to government support. Uh, but I think it's a reality most of the world. It's not only related to Latin America. And if you how to say which is the role of Latin American companies and also companies like big global companies that are having presence in Latin America. Uh,
Yes.
shall we promoting like key players and trying to showcase what's possible with lack of resources and sometimes a region which is not the priority for many big companies? Uh,
Yeah.
what's your experience on that?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I would say is regional action within the global framework is absolutely critical because we are all different, we all come from different cultures, we speak different languages. And I think what's really important is you can have a global framework, but there is not a one size fits all approach that will work, that will live and breathe, that will sing in every region and in every country. And I think, again, and you reference this, Gabrielle, perhaps when resources are limited, when there are challenges with the economy, when maybe you are not getting the support that one would like from the government, as I understand it, you are seeing in Latin America really exciting innovation and hacks and ways to still drive through the mission when perhaps things aren't quite as easy as one might want. I'm going to acknowledge we live in a tricky time, but I think
Hmm.
the thing that can come out of that is our fighting spirit and our spirit of innovation. So I think when things aren't easy, whilst it's hard in the moment, from that innovation, new ways of working, best practice can come. So I think from my perspective, the role that Latin American companies can play is to come to the forefront and have the desire to share what they have learnt. And again, I'm a great believer that you can learn as much from your failures as you can from your successes. So even if it's been tough, let's share those innovations, let's share those hacks, those ways around it, and elevate them onto a global stage, because it may be that something that happens in Chile, for example, might help someone who's working in Zaire in Africa. Forgive me, I'm absolutely making that up, but just an example that we may think, oh, it only works in my region, but we won't know unless we surface it. So I think for Latin American companies, I think learning, sharing with other countries within your region to get that critical mass, and then escalating up globally. I think again that comes back to our point of driving systems change and this power of collaboration. Don't just keep it to yourself. Given we are all united globally in our mission to deliver disability inclusion, when we've learned something, good or bad, and when we have a spotlight in a case study, let's come forward and share in the hope and possibly the certainty that there's someone else out there who will be able to adopt that best practice, learn from it, and also further their own mission.
And this is critical. I mean, I used to work for a big multinational company, and we had a C-level of the company visiting us, and we asked not women about, hey, what shall we do in Argentina, particularly towards those innovative programs that the company was willing to promote in emerging markets. And
Right.
what this person mentioned to us was to say, hey, you know what? Argentina, we were working in Argentina at the time and focusing there is only 1% of the total revenue of the company. So if you want to innovate, innovate here because if it's working, we can scale it up to other markets. But if it fails, you are not going to ruin the company. So
Yes.
we
Yeah,
encourage you to to innovate uh, in emerging markets particularly. So,
that's a lovely example. Thank you.
and regarding partnerships, what do you think that the private sector can leverage in order to enhance disability inclusion?
So I think going back to, as I said, the origin of the Valuable 500, working exclusively on private sector, and again building on what you were alluding to, Gabrielle, of your local saying, that you are achieving success perhaps in spite of the governments. I think if I think in particular, actually, if I think about our partnerships with our companies, what they do is they don't claim to have all the answers, but what they
Mm,
want to do through the Valuable 500, we will partner our businesses with, for example, organizations such as yourselves, Incluyeme for Latin America, or maybe Enable India, the Australian Disability Network. So what we do is we leverage the partnerships that we have globally with the regional disability experts to help provide the solutions for the private sector companies. And then through our community, we then again take that best practice and leverage it across the global corporate sector. So I think really in terms of the strategic partnerships, I think we look particularly on best practice around reporting. So we have various KPIs. I've mentioned some of them, talking about employee resource groups, so sharing
mhm.
partnerships and learnings there, and again through digital accessibility and goals and governance. So there are a whole host of them. But I think really it's about this flow of information through the partnerships from global companies, multinationals who might be still have presence in Latin America. So it's that flow of information through those strategic partnerships that I think work collectively to enhance disability inclusion.
Makes sense. And you have a big event happening in December this year in Tokyo, which is called
Yes,
Sync 25. Can you
yes.
please tell us more about Sync 25, what it means, and for companies?
Yes, of course. So, sync with a Y, and we can see it on the screen. You may have guessed that relates to the way we work together, the power being in the many, taking that synchronized collective action. So, the Valuable 500 was launched through Davos in the World Economic Forum in 2019. And we have spent the last 6 years getting the CEOs on board, but then developing our strategy, which I can come on to in a moment. And for us, Sync 25 is a moment of reckoning. It is a time when we are asking our companies to come together with our disability inclusion experts to report back on the collective progress that we are making. And also importantly, to give ourselves those opportunities to spotlight best practice so we can share. So some of the things that I've referenced in terms of how we work together, it is a physical moment in time when we will be together to spotlight and share. So very specifically, it is a 2-day summit, a conference, starting on International Day of Persons with Disability, so the 3rd of December, and then day 2 on the 4th of December. We are holding it in Tokyo. I appreciate that's a long way for a lot of you to come, but we would love to have you there.
Where
And
is to
we are,
that?
yes, I'm sorry, used to travel. So we are doing it in Tokyo because you may know that our first investors, our first philanthropic funders, were the Nippon Foundation, Asia Pacific's largest philanthropic organization. And without their belief in our mission to end disability exclusion in business, and without their generosity, we would not be here today. So it felt only right that in acknowledgement of their belief and their funding in the early days of the Valuable 500, in recognition of that, we would be holding it in Tokyo. Our relationship with them now is a strategic one, but still of huge value. And we are hosting Sync 25 in partnership with the Nippon Foundation and also with Nikkei, who are Asia Pacific's largest media owner. I'm talking to you from the UK. They own the Financial Times as one of their publications, but they own a whole host of newspapers and TV networks across the Asia Pacific region as well. And happily for me, because I am not an expert in organising events, they are kindly doing the logistics for the event. But Sync 25 is a moment when we will come together with our companies on day one to report back against our collective progress. And as I said, spotlighting the best stories, the best case studies, the best learnings against our strategy, which I've referenced, but just to clarify, we work on inclusive leadership that I've spoken a lot about today. Also inclusive reporting, so the importance of ESG and disability data with some of those metrics that I spoke about, the digital accessibility, the ERGs, the training, the goals and governance. And the other one, which is very, very important for right now, is inclusive representation. And to be clear, the reason why I say it's particularly important right now is about 2 hours ago, I landed back in the UK from Cannes in the south of France for the Cannes Lion Advertising Festival of Creativity. Now, we went there to launch, and you may have seen it on our socials. I can follow up with Gabrielle afterwards. I would love you to look into this. We have launched something called the Nothing Without Us Awards. You will know, I hope, that the rally cry of the disabled community for a long time has been nothing about us without
Hmm.
us. It's now rightly changing to nothing without us. You must bring in, we know this, you must bring in the voices of the disabled community in every single decision-making process. And from a corporate perspective, all the way through what I would call your go-to-market mix. So your product development, your service development, in terms of your strategies, and also in terms of your communication. It is really, really critical that, and it's a big business driver. Again, we know that the disabled community represent 18.3 trillion US dollars in spending power. Why on earth would a brand create an advertisement that didn't authentically represent the community that's 1 in 5 of the global population and has that ability and desire to buy products and services? Why on earth would they not want to reflect authentically people with disabilities in their work? So the Nothing Without Us Awards is a campaign that we have launched to celebrate brands that authentically represent people with disabilities and make their communications accessible. And lastly, my last quick thing I'll say on it, and that is to promote a tool that we have developed that we are rolling out to all our companies and also non-valuable 500 companies as well. We are being truly inclusive and letting everybody have it. It's free of charge. And we're calling it ART, Authentic Representation Tool. It's a maturity model assessment for an organization to assess the state of authentic representation within their business. And not only does it give you a report, but it gives you a concrete action plan with resources and case studies and connections with people who can help and support in order to drive that progress. So I launched it on Monday in Cannes, the Nothing Without Us Awards, to promote this authentic representation tool. So day one of Sync will be spotlighting all the progress against leadership, reporting and representation. And on day two, and I hope this is particularly exciting for you, what we want to do is we want to create the forum on day two to put a spotlight on regions and countries who are delivering change. So again, giving the opportunity to do in real time everything that I've been talking about today. You know, as innovators, as people who are resilient, as people who are passionate, come together and share with the rest of the world the best practice that you are delivering in Latin America. So day one, reporting back on our strategy. Day two, a regional spotlight to take us forward to the next Sync, which will be 2 years later, Sync 27. I know I've said a lot there. I hope that makes sense. I'm sorry if I speak a little fast. We
It's
obviously
fine.
have lots of stuff that I can share afterwards with you, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of the opportunity at Sync, and I think really the impact and the meaning of us coming together as a collective, under a global spotlight, but being able to show regional action.
Definitely, and I want to reinforce what you mentioned about Sync 25 is an opportunity to showcase companies making progress, but it's not aimed at showing companies being perfect. And I think this is key for many companies in the region that we work with several people, very passionate people, and say, hey, you know, you know what? We tried this, we made that, and we are still have like a long way to run and a long way to improve. Either the way we hire, the way we communicate with the community of people with disabilities, and pe- people and companies are making mistakes along the process. And this is definitely part of the journey. I mean,
Yes.
and no company that is perfect, making everything perfect. Uh, I think that the challenge is how can we learn from different experiences from all around the world and showcasing that what we tried, what we accomplished, and how we failed towards that end goal. So,
Yes.
and thank you
Yeah.
for this huge effort. I mean, I cannot imagine how complex it is to gain as many companies as possible, decision makers, CEOs in Tokyo in December. Um, we talk with each other a lot, and we say, hey, if there is a moment of the year to bring your CEO to Japan, it, December is typically a challenge because you have all the holidays coming, and also it's
Yes.
not around the corner. So,
That's very true. That is very true. And Gabrielle, thank you. And I suppose if I can add, and I really appreciate you bringing this up, because I think the reality is no one yet has got it completely right. Think
mhm,
25 is not about a competition. We're not going to be having a league table of who's doing better. It's not like a school report. And I
mhm,
think that the key message that I'm trying to communicate with our companies is it's only if we allow ourselves to come together in a private closed environment, because it will only be open to our disability inclusion allies and our companies. And I think in the spirit of being a true leader, where you can admit that you don't have all the answers, that you can show an element of vulnerability, if we can create that atmosphere, then I think we will have something really special on our hands. Because this is not about flexing muscles and saying, I have all the answers, I'm doing better than you. It's about finding the hope, finding the progress, finding the nuggets of innovation and best practice that doesn't mean it's job done, but it means that collectively we have a better chance of moving forward as one and learning from each other. It is not, as I say, it is not a competition. It is a safe space and an environment where we can come together with the security and the confidence that we are united. We may be all from different parts of the world, but every company represented there has their CEO's face and commitment on our websites. And for me, I feel there is a responsibility of those CEOs who made that commitment to say, I am going to join and I'm going to allow myself a moment in time to learn, to ask questions, to share, and acknowledge that there is still a way to go. It is about progress. It is not about perfection. So I
mhm.
understand that in the competitive corporate world, it can be a little bit scary and intimidating. Oh, will this CEO be doing better than me? It doesn't really matter. As long as you show up, as long as you have the right attitude and you have something to share and something you want to learn, I think it will be a really meaningful and really important occasion. But you're right, Gabrielle. Not just the geography, not just the time zone, but also getting C-suite leaders to allow themselves that slight shift in mindset of it's okay to not be perfect, but I'm committed to making progress.
Definitely. And also the perk of having a long way back home in order to reflect about what should we do
Yes,
better.
there
Yeah,
you
it's a it's an advantage.
go. It will help.
So,
Thank you.
and my last question is, what do you think is expected from companies from Latin America to be shared there?
Okay. So I am not an expert in Latin America. I wish I were. It's a region that I love, and I love the energy and I love the passion, and also I've touched upon this, but I do get a real sense of spirit, and I think a real sense of innovation. So I think rather than me hone in on specific things to share, what I would love is the Latin American spirit and fight and energy, because again, I don't wish to get political, but acknowledging that things are slightly harder than we perhaps would like them to be at the moment.
Hmm.
And knowing that sometimes just being undeterred in terms of what the vision is, understanding we may need to pivot, we may need to do things differently. But I certainly, without embarrassing you, Gabrielle, I get a sense from when I've met you in person, your heart is as big as your head, and I feel that encapsulates a Latin American spirit of the brains, but also the passion and the heart. And I think some of the other regions we work with, they maybe don't have that same level of heart. And I think if we can harness that with some of the best practice, some of the examples and sharings, as I say, it's not for me to be, I think, specific over individual programs, but I know that the companies on the call today will have stories to tell. They will have some examples of best practice. I also get a sense that perhaps you may be more predisposed to being a bit more vulnerable, a bit more open, wearing, as we say in English, to wear your heart on your sleeve. So I think there is a Latin American spirit coupled with innovation and resilience and a desire to push through, that I think if we can harness that and showcase it at Sync, I think it will be a really fantastic regional spotlight. So I think it's the actions and initiatives, but also coupled with the passion. So as I say, the head and the heart.
Makes perfect sense. And I want to go to questions from the audience. So anyone who has a question, please feel free to share those questions in the chat. You can write it down in English or Spanish. And if you're speaking, writing it in Spanish, I can do my best to translate that and try to be as accurate as possible. If not, feel free to reshare the question. We have a few ones already on the Q&A panel. Um, so the first one is uh, regarding if you can share about how Valor 500 is measuring the impact on culture or innovation from companies, and which are the KPIs that you're using.
Okay, perfect. Let me start with the second part. So I've mentioned our strategy, and I focused, and I've shared with you the importance of inclusive reporting. So this is capturing your ESG and disability data. So we authored a white paper that was released through the World Economic Forum in 2023, and we did that in partnership with Allianz and the London Stock Exchange Group. And the 5 KPIs that we ask our companies to adopt, so standardized metrics, are again around workforce representation, so getting that data point, the setting up of ERGs, your employee resource groups, setting goals and governance, implementing training, and then best practice in digital accessibility. Again, making sure that all your assets, all your platforms are digitally accessible. So we ask all our companies to report in the same way against those 5 metrics. And specifically, we launched 6 weeks or so ago what we're calling an accelerator program, which runs masterclasses and know-how sessions to help our companies against each of those 5 KPIs. And I think at the first part of the question was specifically around creating the right culture.
Hmm.
So There was an American management consultant. This is a well-used quote, you may know it, called a gentleman called Peter Drucker. And he said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So what he meant by that is, of course, you can have your strategies, you can have your initiatives and your KPIs, but if you don't have the right culture for those strategies and initiatives to live and breathe and sing, then frankly, it may do something, but it's certainly not going to do what you need. The culture within
Mhm.
an organization is absolutely critical. And again, for us, that comes from the top. If you are the CEO, you are the ultimate role model and champion within that organization that your employees are looking up to. So a CEO who will come forward, we know that 80% of disabilities are invisible. Imagine the power and the unlock of a hugely successful CEO who comes forward and says, I'm neurodivergent, or
Mm.
I am, I have cochlear implants. Someone didn't know that they were, let's say, in inverted commas, different. The power and the unlock of a C-suite leader coming forward and they themselves role modeling the best behavior of bringing their whole self to work, that's absolutely critical. And we've run a program, we're in our last cohort this year, called Generation Valuable, and that's a mentoring program that pairs a C-suite leader who does not identify as living with a disability with next generation disabled talent within their organization. So it goes back to my point
Oh,
of not just a job, but a career. So we match them together and we call it a reciprocal mentoring program, because not only does the disabled employee learn how to be a leader and help to be fast tracked into those leadership positions, but from a cultural perspective, the C-suite leader witnesses themselves the culture and the experience of a disabled employee within their organization. And that's really unbeatable. So that reciprocal mentoring has a program at the heart of it, but it also has the ability to massively change the culture. So there is no doubt that you need both, but really it's the cultural unlock that will allow all the strategies and the programs to really sing.
that's so true. And I had a mentor who always mentioned me that mentorship is never a one-way process. I mean, it's always works both ways. Uh, and I have Maria Angel here asking us, um, she say, I understand that Model 500 operates more at the CEO level. In a company where leadership is convinced but middle management shows resistance, what strategies have you seen work best to cascade the commitment from a top through the organization and ensure it doesn't remain just a statement?
Yes, that's really interesting. So I'm going to go back to the point I was making about employee resource groups. So again, this is the bringing in the voices of the disabled employees into a safe space, but critically with an executive sponsor, because I think there's an argument to say that if you've got that grassroots activism at the bottom and you've also got that C-suite commitment from the top, then you're then going to start to get that traction within that middle management. But I think what I would propose is, if the person who asked the question, Mariangela, I think you said, forgive my pronunciation,
It's
if
fine.
if they've got if they have a blocker, then invite someone in from that middle management team. Say, come and join in your lunch break, one of our disability inclusion employee resource groups, and just start to learn. Because I'm a passionate believer that, sadly, there probably are some bad people out there, but I think if people are resistant, it
Mm.
isn't necessarily with bad intent. It's probably fear. It's probably fear of getting it wrong. It's hard. Language. Language is a really tricky thing in terms of talking about disability inclusion, in terms of the right language, in terms of identity, creating a space where people feel that they are psychologically safe. And I think sometimes people would rather say nothing than and do nothing rather than fear of getting it wrong. So I think if you can create an environment where perhaps you just start a dialogue by just asking a really simple question. Then the biggest challenge we talk to about with our companies is if companies come to us and they say, we're worried we're not doing enough. The only thing that any company could be doing that would be classified as wrong is not starting. And sometimes
Hmm.
it can be as simple as that first question. So I would suggest that if you feel you're getting resistance from middle management, don't assume that it's because they're not supportive. The chances are it's because they don't know where to start, and maybe they're uncomfortable about the fear of getting it wrong. So if you can invite them in and create a safe space where you just get to know each other and start to ask some fairly simple questions, I think then you'll start to get that ripple effect. Because you only need one ally within that middle management who will then start to be that advocate. But yeah, very often just one simple conversation, one simple question, one sharing of one human experience can be a massive unlock.
Uh, in our case, we have the experience of having managers who never had the experience of working with a person with a disability. And what we worked for us was to make those mentorship sessions where we say, hey, you have no obligation here to hire anyone, but to commit your time, which was 1 hour a week, to provide your experience about who was your corporate career and how can you translate that to someone who is starting on their careers. And I will say that we tend to fear what we don't know. So
Yes.
putting a face and to a person with a disability and also learning from what was the barriers of that person and also the experience and the motivation for that person to join the company and to earn income. It was life changing for the manager and for the for the mentee
Yeah.
because they start to know each other. They drop down barriers, and it was one of the, I would say, the most successful programs we had uh, because it was just getting to the known and say, hey, you know what? I mean, I know Katie, and you are not more a label in my mind.
Yeah.
So I know your motivations and I know you. So it was very helpful for, particularly for mid management, in order to stop the sayings of many people who say, "Hey, that's awesome for the company. I hope that the company is going to hire as many people as possible, but I'm crossing my fingers. The team next to me is going to start doing that because my team
Yes.
needs to deliver as many results, so I cannot afford to do that." So it was
Yeah.
removing a lot of biases towards inclusion.
Yeah.
And
And I think sorry, Gabriella, just one
no,
quick
no.
thing to add is I think a really important unlock is for us all to understand that people with disabilities should not be seen as separate or other. I think with an aging population and understanding that the disabled community is a community that any of us can join at any time through diagnosis, through accident, through illness, or through age. It is a reality of the human condition that we all have slightly different needs. And I think if you shift away from labels and making the conversation about an identity and understand that we are all humans, and as we grow and as we age and as our life changes, we just have different needs. And I think I loved what you were saying there. You sort of start the conversation and you just get to know someone on a human level because we're all human beings. We've all so I think again maybe a way to break down that fear is to stop thinking about people with disabilities as separate or other. They may, one may live their life slightly differently, have different needs, different experiences, but you can say that about all humans. So I think that understanding that it's us, not them, I think hopefully takes the fear out of it, and you will very quickly just get that connection from which the understanding and the relationship can build and grow. And linked to what you were saying at the end, of course, you were talking about productivity and stuff. Again, we want people in our organizations who think differently, who feel differently, because they're the innovators, they're creative, they're resilient. So we've got to stop thinking about it as other or separate or compliance, but a sense of us, and bringing in everybody who can make our businesses happier, more rich, more diverse, and more productive.
So true. I have a question here from Victoria. She said, thank you for this space. I have a question. Considering global inclusion frameworks, how can a company in Latin America adapt these commitments so that they align with all cultural, economic, and legal realities? And legal realities.
Legal
So
realities.
legal
Wow. Okay.
realities, I'm going to skip that to another
Thank you.
episode. Because it can be tricky depending on the country where you're at.
Yeah.
But I think that regarding the cultural situation and also the economic possibilities of the regions, uh, it, there is always a way to adapt the commitments. Um,
Yes.
which is your experience on that?
Yeah. So again, I think it's really important to always bear in mind those global commitments. And as I said, if I go back to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, in particular talking about decent work and the right to work, I think that's a fundamental for a business to hold on to. And if you and the other one, of course, is linked to eradicating inequalities. So, as an employer, as a company, thinking about how to adapt that so it works within the culture. Again, it comes back to the inclusive best practice in terms of hiring and training and the retention. But I think the thing I would always hold on to from a regional perspective is looking at best practice to help make the economic argument. Because again, there are a lot of case studies and a lot of examples out there where it is absolutely fundamentally proven that if you make your products and services more inclusive and you're opening them to a wider audience, I was talking before about that 18.3 trillion US dollar market spending potential. You know, I would say, of course, it is absolutely a moral imperative to make sure no one is left behind and everybody has the opportunity to work and to contribute to society. But we should not shy away from the business imperative and the business growth opportunity. So, whilst you have these global frameworks, if you can find examples within your countries, within your regions, through best practice where a local company, a regional company, has delivered growth through their inclusive hiring and their retention, then I think that really helps resonate as well. So I think I'm certain that everybody on the call is 100% behind the moral and the societal and the human imperative, but sometimes getting that business data showing how it delivers productivity and economic growth can really help, I think, take those global frameworks and show how they can deliver regional action and regional growth and progress.
Mhm. We have Ruby here asking, many companies in the World 500 are in the tech sector. What best practices can they share regarding the principle of inclusive design or design for all, ensuring that products and services are accessible from the beginning and not just adapted later?
That's a really lovely question. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, you've hit some of the answer in your question. When you design with a different ability, with a disability in mind, it benefits all of us. If you look at some of the best inventions, some of the best innovations, they were designed to help people with different abilities, help disabled people. I think in the US there is an expression of the curb cutter event. In the UK, I'd
Hmm.
call it a pavement, a sidewalk, but you have the curb. That was designed for people in wheelchairs. But of course, that can benefit everybody from a parent with a pushchair to a delivery driver. It's just something that is absolutely second nature for us. And I think, if we take some of our tech companies, and you're right, we have quite a strong foothold within the tech sector. I think the reason why they're progressive is because, in my mind, innovation equals inclusion, and inclusion equals innovation. If you are designing a product, full stop. Let's say it's a smartphone. I won't name brands, but a smartphone. You want as many people as possible to use it with the most seamless, smooth, beautiful user experience. So then what you do is you adapt and you innovate to be inclusive by definition. And you don't need to call out different groups or communities. You just say, I'm creating something and I want as many people as possible to buy this. And I want as many people as possible to love it and be loyal and help my brand grow. So I think there are massive learnings from the tech community, but actually it's very simple. It's just starting with, I am designing a product or a service, and how can I make sure as many people as possible enjoy it? So therefore it goes back to always bring, if you're designing a product and you want to sell it to someone, bring in the voices of those people in the product design, test it, iterate, learn. You can do it both internally through your workforce, but externally through experts, through an advisory board. Again, if you're bringing in the voices of the people who you want to enjoy your product throughout the entire go-to-market mix, then the chances are you're going to get it right because you will have thought of everything. But you can't do that if you work in a bubble and you work in a silo, or inclusion just becomes an afterthought at a latter stage of development. And I think that's what the tech companies do. How do I make this product brilliant and accessible to everyone? So it's baked into their DNA to be inclusive through their desire to innovate.
So true, and particularly coming from the tech sector, there are like two commandments. One is never move to production on Fridays, and the second one is test, test, and test. And part of what you mentioned before is uh, if you are involving people with disabilities as part of the testing phases that you are elaborating, you are getting sure there that you are going to make, I will not say zero mistakes, because a part of being a software company is to make mistakes and to deliver and then to improve, but also to be sure that all the point of views of different users are being taken into account, and with several use cases that you never imagined before if you are not involving people with different disabilities as part of the development of software products.
Yeah.
We have think we have time for one last question.
Okay.
And again, Katie, I know it's later for you, so we
No,
want to
good.
be very respectful of your time. We have Aaron saying, I've got a question. How are member companies extending their inclusion principles beyond their own employees to their supply chains? Hmm.
Another brilliant question. So the short answer is and so, sorry, just so I'm clear, was the question, can or should employees extend their disability inclusion principles beyond employees to supply chains? Is that right? It was a question as to whether or not they should do
Mhm.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. Absolutely. Now, I acknowledge that the further you get away along your supply chain from your core control, the harder it can be. But I still think big business has the responsibility to audit and check that their supply chain adheres to the same practices. But again, I think if you've got that mindset of curiosity and understanding that not everyone will have the answers, and this acknowledgement that it's hard, it's not about going throughout your supply chain and chastising, but share your principles to help educate and grow and bring people in. And of course, if your suppliers aren't willing, then personally, I would say you walk away and you find someone else. But I think you've got to have that mindset sometimes of you don't know what you don't know. But if a company truly has truly has inclusion baked into their DNA and baked into their business strategy, I think they have a responsibility to make sure that continues outside of the confines of their company, because you're not going to be truly inclusive if you're just focusing on one part of that supply chain. So I acknowledge it's hard, but I think it is critical that truly inclusive businesses feel proud of what they've done and have that generosity of spirit, but also that moral obligation to share along and throughout the supply chain. Because I think without that, their inclusion efforts are not as authentic as they should be. So I acknowledge it's hard, but I think it is really critical. But be patient and be happy to share and educate, because I think most people will be very receptive and very grateful. But it is critical to have it throughout that process.
That's true. In our experience, we have several companies um, doing like baby steps, I will say. And sometimes the first step is start asking to your suppliers, okay, do you have policy towards including people with disabilities in your process? And
Yeah.
by only asking this question, that
Yes.
can deploy a lot of actions inside your suppliers. So
Yes.
uh, we fully understand that many companies are having so many priorities that it's impossible to cover them all. But makes sense sometimes to start asking, then to say, hey, if you respond yes here, can you share us a policy on fair employment and best practices you can share? And either you're going to get surprised about how are your companies that you're working with making progress, and on the other hand, you're like making powerful questions to your suppliers. Hey, I never thought about this, so
Yeah.
I need to start thinking and trying to find new ways to be or earn more points with these companies. So then I likely going to be more suitable for sell my goods to or services to the company. So it's a really good, really good question.
Mm.
I think it's challenging sometimes to have like a purchasing department to say, hey, despite of all the policies I have, I need to also add this, but it worth the effort. And
I agree.
I have one last question to finish, and there is Julia saying, I'll try to translate that properly. So she said, it will be interesting to hear about how Incluyeme and Bottle 500 work and how they collaborate and what specific actions they carry out together. Okay, this is one. Uh,
Yes.
um, and
So I'm happy to share. So I was lucky enough to meet Gabrielle for the first time in January. And in the spirit of being open and vulnerable, I really wish I'd met Gabrielle sooner. um, because I see, not just from today, but from the conversations that we've had, is the work that Incluyeme do is really best in class from a regional perspective. And again, I know that things are very hard given your geography, perhaps, shall we say. So I think, and I'm thinking specifically your proximity to another part of the world where things are a little bit more challenging. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to be diplomatic. So I think in terms of our partnership, really, I think today really marks the start of our intentionality for Gabrielle and I to work together with the Valuable 500, my team with the Valuable 500 and Gabrielle's team with Incluyeme, to really bring to life that sort of regional convening and best practice, turbocharged by regional action and best practice. Because I'm not making excuses, but we're a tiny company. There are 11 of us. We're pretty small, and most of us are sort of sitting in London, and it's hard. And without allies such as Gabrielle and Incluyeme, we realistically, I shared the statistics: 11 people trying to connect with 527 companies, 24 million employees, day in, day out, with the best will in the world. That's really hard. There are just not enough hours in the day. So being able to have partners with such a strong understanding of the regional potential, the regional challenges, the regional best practice, really for me that really brings to life the spirit of the power being in the many and that radical collaboration. So us with our global oversight, but with the real world examples that the Incluyeme team see from the companies that you work with day in, day out. So today's a big day because we've been talking about this for a few months. We met again in Berlin at the Global Disability Summit. But I think really what turbocharged everything was me explaining to Gabrielle how on day 2 of Sync 25, we want to create this environment where regions can show at a global level the work that they're doing, and in that safe space so that we can learn from each other. So for me today, in the partnership is really an encapsulation of how the Valuable 500 should work at a global level with the best experts within regions.
And thank you for your words. And it's always a pleasure to work with an organization like World of 500 and leaders like Katie and many people of your team who had the privilege to work with. And I think that your success is our success. I will try to say that uh, the more uh, companies are joining World 500 and making commitments and making progress, it's on the benefit of all the region and all the world. So uh, we have the responsibility to showcase the experience of our customers and companies we're working with from Latin America, and hopefully taking those experiences to Sync 25 in Tokyo. And we're crossing our fingers that we can have as many companies giving the voice of Latin America as possible, because there can be sparks for other initiatives in our markets. So this is going to be for the benefit of people with disabilities in different regions. And it works both ways. I mean, if those companies are hearing from the experiences of other companies, I mean, any geography, and they can say, okay, maybe back home I can take one or two things to implement in the next 3 months.
Yeah,
That's it's going to be a huge success for the companies attending to World 500. And I want to think that this is the opportunity to learn from different companies making different initiatives and also uh, having the power of communication. One thing I've admired a lot of World of 500 is, and I'm inviting everyone to look into their channels and to see how they are communicating what you're doing and also how they are showcasing the initiatives is top class. So there is a lot of learning from the experience and work of World 500. I cannot believe still that you are having such a small team to deliver as many things as you're delivering. So hats off for the team and the work you're doing. So this is
thank
the
you.
end of this webinar. Katie, I want to thank you a lot for your time and your knowledge today and the generosity of being here. We know it's late for you, and apparently it's sunny there, so we are avoiding
Yes.
you to enjoy a sunny day, which is not common in London. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. As you say, it's hard, but it's a lot easier with allies such as yourselves. So thank you so much. Thank you all for your time and your thoughtful questions. And I cross my fingers and hope to see you at Sync 25 in Tokyo. But thank you genuinely for everything that you do. And Gabriel, muchas gracias. Adios.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. Bye.